working as planned, because I'm just gonna get started. Yes. Um, Thanks very much, Liz, for the introduction. Yes, this is a repeat of a presentation that I did earlier this year to LAFTEC in New Orleans, and I believe it was very well received. I'm repeating the same presentation for everyone. Just as a heads up, my camera tends to freeze a few minutes in, but this everything else works regardless, so we are going to continue with this. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, typically I would start with a slide describing the region of Peel, where it is, how it works. For you guys, I think it's suffice to say that we are kind of a big deal in GTA. This slide explains our location and the growth. The credit goes to Martin Pendlebury. I've used this slide many times. I believe most of you are familiar with Peel, and I don't have to spend more time on this. From this, we get into what is Dragonfly. So Dragonfly is this booklet that I'm holding in my hands. It's very slickly, nicely designed. It's only a few pages, and the topic of this presentation is to explain what this document is. So depending on who's reading it, they would think of this as an inflow and infiltration reduction. Some people would think of it as a flood prevention program. Some others would think of it as a state of good repair. These are all correct. There are other names on the screen as well on the slide as how you would describe this document. But the best term that I found to explain it is wet weather flow management plan for the region of Peel, and I would explain what that means. Before we get into the details of that, I also want to explain why we called it Dragonfly. You see a lot of technical terms on the screen, and engineers are known to come up with abbreviations of 6, 8, 4 letters, including 2 W's, 3 S's, and whatnot. We didn't want to do that. We didn't want to invent a new abbreviation that no one relates to. Hence, we picked the name Dragonfly. So why Dragonfly of all the possibilities? Because dragonflies do exhibit traits that are very similar to what water and wastewater people are. They are incredibly great teamwork players. They are very resilient. They've been living on this planet for as long as the planet existed. And also, if you see dragonflies around, it usually means that the water quality in that general area is very good. Putting all of that together, it just kind of seems like a good example for what water and wastewater team as a whole does, as well as uh, showing the work that we conduct. So let's talk about wet weather flow management and what does that mean. The big square that you see on the screen, if this was the representation of all drainage work as a whole, both the green and the blue piece together, one big piece. If we put all the work that we do in terms of drainage into this box, and drainage basically means taking fluids and liquids away from where we live, from our homes and places of work. It would be divided in 2 pieces, shown in green and blue. Green represents all the storm work, and the blue represents the wastewater work. Simple, very clearly defined. The two are separated from each other, and green is, yes, in fact, bigger than the blue part, because stormwater management involves rivers and lakes and oceans and coastal work and riverine work and everything. Some of it is not even relevant to the region of Peel, but that's all in here. And the wastewater is the work that we do. We collect the wastewater, take it to the treatment plant, treat it, and then return it back to the environment. That work. So if this picture was representing everything drainage-wise, what's relevant to rain is shown with this drop. And you would notice that a bigger portion of it again falls on the storm water because rain and storm go well together. However, there's a portion of it that encroaches into the wastewater side of thing. And that's the part that makes wet weather flow management a little bit difficult, because rain is very much a storm thing than a wastewater thing. Because wastewater is very much defined. We all know that the wastewater is produced in toilets and showers and kitchens when we do the dishes and whatnot. Nowhere else. How rain suddenly comes into the picture is just muddies the water. It just complicates things. That portion, that little sliver that the rain encroaches into the wastewater side of things, is called wet weather flow management. That's where the topic of wet weather flow management is. Why should we care about this? Because it rains and it causes a lot of issues. This is an example of what a rain event may look like. It's very recent, from July of this year, and you're looking at a dumpster carried through the streets in Mississauga. The rain will just take this directly into the middle of the intersection. It can cause a lot of flow. It can result in all sort of damage. Part of it needs to be dealt with on the stormwater side, and the other part need to be dealt with on the sanitary side. So we just want to make sure that we do our part to protect the properties and everything. So which kind of, well, the video, as you see, progresses, and you can see that it goes right into the middle of an intersection. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so what are the threats of wet weather events? They can result in sanitary sewer backup. We often refer to them as basement flooding. When there's so much flow going in any direction, flow may just come back into the property. And that's the opposite of what we want to do. We want to take that away. I started with explaining drainage and how we want it to go away. It coming back to us is an issue. Also, sometimes it results that the flow goes where it was not supposed to go. It goes to the river. I said it needs to go to the treatment plant, but if it goes to the river, that's also a problem. Also, all the development that are coming online as we grow, and the growth that we experience in region of Peel, need to be serviced via these pipes and whatnot. So the capacity in that infrastructure, in those pipes, is very precious. So if that space is taken by something other than wastewater, we need to think about that, because if you take that out, now you've created new capacity to support growth and move this forward. So how can we do this? How can we ensure that we are doing our part and our system is used for its intended purposes? In other words, wet weather events have minimal impact on our operation. There are only so many things we can do. I explained very beginning, there is a storm event that is outside of our jurisdiction. Within our jurisdiction, the four things that are on the screen are the things that we can do. Starting with care, that talks about state of good repair, keeping your system in good shape, fixing manholes and pipes and whatnot is part of it. Then we want to optimize. We want to make sure that no extraneous flow that is not supposed to be in our system is getting into it. That's the topic of I&I reduction, downspout disconnection, fixing cross connections, and such. And I want to be very clear here, fixing those manholes and pipes, we don't qualify that as I&I reduction. You need to do that work. So in some other jurisdictions around us, they consider that as I&I reduction. We don't. And even if you do the best care systems and the most optimized ones still may find themselves that they need additional capacity to deal with weather events. And that's when you go to enhance. We've always looked at our system from the growth perspective, but now we've included via the Dragonfly the lens of ensuring wet weather into it as well. And that sometimes result in us needing to build bigger infrastructure, additional pipes and whatnot. And the last pillar is the prevent legacy issues. We want to make sure that every lesson that we learn along the way is incorporated into our ongoing business as usual, so that we don't repeat them on ongoing basis. Okay, That kind of explains 60% of the Dragonfly. So the document starts with explaining the goals, tells you the things that needs to be done, and now the last piece is when and how it's going to get done. So are all these action groups implemented everywhere within the region? The answer is absolutely yes. They're all active, without exception, everywhere within the boundaries of the region of Peel. However, what Dragonfly tells us is that if we focus our attention, only 5% of our collective annual effort in a geographical area, every 4 years, we are going to get a better product. Meaning that all these action groups performed by a few hundred staff, done within a geographical neighborhood, you're going to get a better product at the end of every 4 years, which means that you can't do everything everywhere in the region all at once. It's going to be too big, so you need to prioritize somehow. How are you going to do that? You're going to break the system into pieces and then prioritize it. How is that done? Very simple. Simple fact about the sanitary system, it's very much like a tree. If you think of each home as a leaf, they're connected to little branches, and then the little branches come together and build a bigger pipe, a bigger branch, and then these bigger branches come together until eventually they form what's referred to as a trunk. That is exactly why we call our bigger pipes trunk as well. That's coming from this analogy of the tree. And the flow, it's a one-way direction. So as you see on the image here, the trees also are in pieces. They call them canopies. The sanitary system is very much like that. So you can divide that into these canopies. We call them blocks. We have 40 of those. They are relatively independent from each other. They're connected through the big system, but not at the top. What this enables us is to think of a big, really convoluted system as as a few smaller pieces that are somewhat independent from each other. That helps us focus our attention. So if you think of these 40 pieces the way that are laid out on this system, the image on the left, which is one big piece, gradually turns into this little mosaic of different smaller pieces. And now you can look at each of those individually and focus your attention. So that's what we do. For each of these blocks, we can look at the history of flooding, go into history and see which one has done better and which one has done worse and assign a score to it. You can look at the properties that are within the floodplain, how many of them are there. You can look at the number of overflow structures. There's a list of 15 of those on the screen. These are all quantitative factors that you can go look at each block, score them, and then if you put them all together, it's going to give you one value. But that's not all. We've also incorporated the institutional knowledge carried by our staff into the process. You put all of that together, you get a score for each of the blocks, and naturally the ones that rise to the top are going to be the one that get the priority. That 5% collective effort that we are going to put aside would be directed in those. By the way, these indicators, if you look at them and think about them deeply, they really are representing the goals and the action groups that I explained earlier. Okay, we do the prioritization, we pick them, and then we go after them. Something else that I want to highlight, one of the last slides that I have, uh, we did all of this work differently than almost any other jurisdiction. We did not go and create a wet weather flow team and dedicate 10 to 20 staff to it to do the work, because a lot of the expertise that was needed already existed in our org chart. So the way that we did this was we went into all of those existing systems and modified their mandate ever so slightly. There were a few that needed to be created, but we did not create any duplication. We didn't create a separate team so that later we need to uh, build it and move it into the existing structures. We just went and modified a few mandates, a few programs, and created our program, which is a big deal. It has saved us a lot of money, and we are very, very proud of the way that work was done. With that, that's it. If you're interested in seeing this document, there are hard copies at 10PL. You can reach out to me, but you can also find them at the mailroom on Suite A 10PL for a hard copy, or scan the QR code on the screen and get a digital copy of that. And with that, I'm at your service if you have any question. Thanks. I think I did it within time.
You did. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions